You are listening to the Nature's Premier Podcast, episode 22. Here on the Nature's Premier Podcast, we talk about everything from bees to babies and sustainable living. Join us while we talk about natural parenting and different ways to live a more sustainable lifestyle for ourselves and our future generations to come. Now let's begin. Good morning and welcome back everyone to the Nature's Premier Podcast. I am your host, Brooke Nichols, founder of Nature's Premier Diaper Service, located here on Long Island, New York, and I am so excited and very grateful to be here with you all today. On today's episode of the podcast, we are going to be discussing a very important topic that is rarely discussed and that is growing at an alarming rate, and that is the threatened and critically endangered status affecting many animals and plant life every day from New York to across the world. We are losing many species of animal and plant life every year at such a shockingly alarming rate never before seen since record keeping began. Many people do not discuss this or have any interest in knowing why it affects us, so you can count on me to walk you through what's going on, some of the animals that are affected, and why we should all be paying attention to the rising extinction rates from around the world as they indirectly and directly impact us on some level. There are many reasons why species become endangered and extinct, but the main reason is human fragmentation. So listen closely while I discuss some stats on extinction, causes, and what we can do to help bring awareness to this important issue. Please share this episode so more people learn about the devastating epidemic affecting the lives of millions of animals today. So, what is an endangered species? An endangered species are those animals considered to be at risk of extinction, meaning that there are so few left of their kind that they could disappear from the planet altogether in the foreseeable future. The current rate of extinction is thought to be far greater than the expected natural rate, with many species going extinct before they were ever discovered. Shockingly, current estimates suggest that a third of the world's amphibians, a quarter of all mammals, and 1 in 8 birds are endangered. This loss of wildlife is startling, and people are at risk too. Without action, the world will become much less hospitable for all of us. We must consider our impact on nature as we make development, economic, business, and lifestyle choices. A shared understanding of the link between humanity and nature is essential to making profound changes that will allow all life to thrive for generations to come. There are several factors contributing to the growing number of endangered animals. Although natural forces can destroy or strain an animal population, increasingly the activities of man have caused a large number of animals to become endangered. One of the major drivers of this epidemic is loss of habitat. Since the beginning of the human industry, the leading cause of extinctions has been loss of habitat, animals finding their homes destroyed to the point at which their survival is no longer possible. While habitat loss may be due to natural forces such as geologic changes and climate shifts, much of the habitat lost today is due to human activity. The construction of highways, canals, urbanization, and agriculture dramatically affect the inhabitants of native ecosystems. According to the World Wildlife Fund, the net loss in global forest area during the 1990s was about 94 million HA, which is equivalent to 2.4% of all forests. Around half of the world's original forests have disappeared, and they are still being removed at the rate of 10 times higher than any possible regrowth. As tropical forests contain at least half of the Earth's species, the clearance of some 17 million hectares each year is a dramatic loss. So, one of the major reasons for habitat loss is agriculture. Around 50% of the world's habitable land has already been converted to farming land. Overall, farmland covers a whopping 35% of the world's land area. Now, that is a massive, massive number, especially because we are growing as a population and land is very precious. 35% of the world's land area is for farming. So just let that sink in. Now, that can certainly segue this conversation into why are we allowing big ag companies to destroy the rainforests, destroy the homes of millions of animals, plant life, and tribesmen, just to slaughter these cows, allow these cows to graze, allow them to add more pollution into the atmosphere, into our waterways, and then later slaughter them and then have people eat them and then have these people get sick in turn. But truthfully, that's a totally different conversation, and it's a very deep rabbit hole that we may cover at another time. But these are the kind of questions that we have to ask, because it's completely irresponsible for these major companies to come into the rainforest and literally just wipe out everything. These people literally plow through the rainforest, destroy all of the biodiversity, all of the plant life, destroy people's homes. There are tribes people that after the rainforest is completely brutalized, they go and they pray because that was their home. And we touched on this in the deforestation episode. People don't realize the agriculture industry, the deforestation industry is devastating on not only plant and animal life, it is completely devastating on the people that rely on the rainforest for their livelihood, for their homes, for their medicinal herbs, for their culture. I mean, it's completely just deplorable behavior on the act of these industries. And that's my personal opinion, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, because you see it when you lay it all out. You see that the design of these industries is just not sustainable. It's literally for profit. You're killing people, you're killing animals, you're wiping them completely off the map. We can't bring these animals back. And there's plants that we have never discovered that could very well cure cancer that we're just taking them out. We're just annihilating everything in our wake. So another reason for habitat loss is the palm oil industry. Yes, I bring this up constantly, but it's such an important discussion that, again, we are just simply not having with enough people. Enough people don't know the devastation that the palm oil industry is causing, again, for people, humans, and plant life, and the planet alike. The palm oil industry is the direct driver destroying land and thrusting animals into the critically endangered category on a massive scale. As their habitats are being destroyed and fragmented, then converted to palm plantations, roads have been constructed throughout the region. This provides poachers with easy access to the animals that they otherwise would not have, making them much easier targets and victims of hunting and poaching. Animals such as the Sumatran tiger, Bornean orangutan, and pygmy elephant are just a few animals that are greatly impacted by this industry. Scientists believe that if we continue with the many unethical practices of harvesting palm oil, that these species will become extinct, also known as gone forever, in less than 20 years. Overhunting and poaching is also a serious threat against many endangered animals. According to endangered.org, some stats here are that at the beginning of the 20th century, there were millions of African elephants and around 100,000 Asian elephants. There are now less than 500,000 African elephants and 35 to 40,000 Asian elephants left. A 2010 United Nations report suggests that gorillas could disappear from the Congo Basin by the mid-2020s. The black rhino population has been reduced by 97.6% since the 1960s. There are thought to be fewer than 900 mountain gorillas left in Africa. Rhino horn is often known as the most expensive commodity in the world, valued at $30,000 per pound. Gold is priced at around $20,000 per pound. So just to give you some perspective. During 2011 alone, around 1 of every 12 African elephants was killed by a poacher. There are more tigers in American backyards than in the wild. So as you can see, poaching is a very serious threat to endangered species. A lot of these areas around the world, they don't care if they're endangered. They know they can make a lot of money off of their skins, especially tiger skins. And as you saw, especially rhino horns, you have elephant tusks. I've seen such horrible images of elephants that will get their tusks taken off and they're half alive, and they leave them there. There's a lot of really, really sad situations that are happening right now in the world. Just like with everything. But mainly, what we're talking today about is the endangered species and how they're being treated, how they are being just wiped off the planet. It's a very serious problem, and there's a very high corruption. A lot of people don't realize that. The government can make different, like for example, we have the Environmental Species Protection Act, right? And that was started by, I believe it was President Nixon back in like early 1970s, I think 1973. And that's for like protecting species, identifying that we have a serious issue with, threatened, endangered, and extinct species. It was kind of like a form of conservation. But in a lot of countries where, the governments are taking action, it's still, there's a lot of corruption as well. And not to say that it's within the government, but it's certainly within the people that are on the grounds that are supposed to be protecting these animals. So another way around it, what some people are doing that I am just personally completely against, I think it's completely unethical, and that's called canned hunting. For those of you who don't know, canned hunting is when they have an area that they'll have like an endangered animal, like such like lions or tigers, and they'll have them confined within like a 1 mile radius. And very wealthy people will go and they'll kill them. And it's just such exploitation. It's just awful. I mean, it's truthfully. And there's a lot of controversy. There's been some documentaries on it. I think we're all entitled to our opinions. For me personally, I think that game hunting is awful. It's completely unethical. It's driving the extinction of all of these animals, and I think it's something that should be banned. I think it's something that should be frowned upon, especially in other parts of the world. There are certainly organizations that are fighting to protect these animals against poaching, against illegal hunting, which is poaching, but there's other like tiers of hunting and things like that, over hunting, over harvesting of plant life. But I think a lot of more people need to know how devastating it is for the environment. I mean, just the fact that there are more tigers in American backyards than in the wild is disturbing. It's disturbing. And again, a big driver of that, to circle back to habitat loss, is that their homes are disappearing at such an alarming rate. Now you have, like for example, the orangutans, right? The Bornean orangutan, they live most of their life high in the treetops. Now, what happens is there's like a turn and burn with these trees. So these people will come in, they'll burn these trees down, and you have these these orangutans up in the treetops, and a lot of times they'll burn alive. I mean, it's really devastating to know like what's happening to these animals, and it's because of these agriculture, it's because of palm oil, it's because of poaching. I mean, these are all very alarming situations, and like they say, by in the next 20 years, half of these animals are going to be gone because they go from threatened and they jump to endangered in a very short time period. The only reason why an animal becomes threatened is because they see that they're at a possible risk for extinction. But when an animal becomes threatened, it's a very quick, slippery slope. I'm surprised that tigers, from when I was a kid, I always loved tigers, and I followed the Save the Tiger Fund, which is now Panera, I believe, or Panthera. Not Panera, that's Panera Bread. I think it's Panthera. They kind of merged with another organization. But even then, like Exxon was coming in, they were trying to help stabilize the tiger numbers, but they were at risk of extinction then. Now they are critically endangered, which means the next step is they're gone. Now, some people will argue with me that we can control the, hunting numbers, that it can help stabilize the overpopulation of, like, let's say a said animal, like deer, right? Like, we have deer hunters that get tags that, they can hunt, one deer a year or whatever. But those have to be seriously, like police. Because the classic example of overhunting, which leads these animals to be extinct, is the passenger pigeon. There were so many passenger pigeons back in the 1600s, it made up like almost 50% of the bird population. Now they were completely overhunted. We used them for all different tasks. We ate them, and now they were wiped off the face of the earth. So like overhunting is a real thing, even if it is legal. It's certainly something that we have to police more. I think that it's something that definitely adds to the conversation. Now, one of the main concerns about this mass extinction and, these animals being thrown into threatened and endangered categories and then later just leaving the planet altogether is that this affects us. We all, we're all different species, we all have different needs, but we all rely on the same ecosystem. So what a lot of people don't realize, even if, let's say, they're not even, they have a pet dog or they hate animals, like, they have to understand that, the rising extinction rates are very alarming for humans. I mean, take bees, for example. A lot of people don't realize that bees are under the threat of extinction. They are responsible for pollinating more than 250,000 species of plants. However, a malady known as colony collapse disorder, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, has wiped out entire populations of this insect, and scientists have yet to discover its true cause. Dwindling bee populations have already forced some growers to import colonies to their fields in order to keep yields up, and continued losses could threaten the supply of crops like almonds, apples, and cucumbers. The different varieties of crops that humans rely on for food worldwide, 87 rely on pollinators, mainly honeybees, while only 28 different crops could survive without such assistance. Now, can you imagine the bees just falling off the face of the earth? Do you know how devastating that would be for our food supply and all of the animals and organisms and other plant life that rely on bees? Now, some people say it can't happen, but they're dying at such an alarming rate that it's just very concerning. And the same thing is with other species as well. Now, we have, just to go back to the overfishing, right? Like that practice alone, when we're overfishing the ocean, we're taking all of those, there's like a homeostasis that has to be met. You can't just have major sections of animals become extinct because they all keep each other in check. There's checks and balances in life, and that's in the ocean, that's in the rainforest, that's in our day-to-day interactions, with people, with just life. There's checks and balances. And when you take one type of fish out, now let's say the organism that the fish ate overpopulates and it starts to disrupt the harmony of, let's say, the whales, of the dolphins. And we already know that they're endangered too. We already know that there's many different types of marine life that are dying at an alarming rate. Now, they are affected by different drivers. They may not be affected by, let's say, deforestation, but they're affected greatly by overfishing. They're affected greatly by pollution. And again, these are human practices. This is just a direct effect from our unsustainable, unethical practices in society. And you guys, just to keep it like as real as possible, humans dominate the world, right? We dominate everything. We dominate tech, we dominate nature, we dominate everything that we touch, right? And, there's never been a better time to live than in 2017. We have so many things that we haven't had technology-wise, just being more progressive. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world that we can be grateful for. But one thing that has to be on our radar is that if animals and plant life are dying at such an alarming rate, are becoming threatened, are becoming endangered, are later becoming extinct, that should be thrown and thrusted right in front of us and show us that we are not invincible. If we can't live within the confines of the homeostasis the planet has set up for us to live with other animals, what makes anyone think that in 100 years we'd be able to sustain our populations? If the rainforest is dying, the Amazon rainforest is not going to be here when my kids are my age. Like, it's just not going to be here. And it's heartbreaking to think about. But if we are literally knocking out ecosystems and just destroying biodiversity that took hundreds of years to make and create, we are not going to be able to survive as a species. We're just not going to be able to, and that opens up, again, another segued conversation into, you're getting into like robotics territory and, just having like artificial, let's say even like bees, right? Like bees become extinct. So what's going to pollinate our plants? What's going to help us stay alive? Then we have to get innovative that way. But why can't we just live the way nature intended and, not destroy everything in our wake? That's the question we could be asking if we didn't have any alternatives. But fortunately, we have many alternatives in this situation. We certainly can come together. We can put a message out there to these major companies, put a message out there just in general about the practices that we're doing in society, right? Like the habitat loss is a direct driver of endangered animals. And, in order for us to protect the endangered animals, even locally, we didn't even touch on that because it's such a deep topic, again, that we will be covering in depth. We will have occasional episodes on this situation because it's very deep and it spans across the world, something that I can't wrap up in a 20-minute episode. But, like even locally, like here on Long Island, we have several animal species really a lot more. We have shorebirds, we have all different sound animals that are endangered. And, especially the plant life here, the biodiversity here, with knocking down, forests and making condominiums and, just more apartment complexes. Like, we have our issues everywhere. It may be different than like in India where they have their own set of issues, but we all have to care about this because it's just a mass global practice that is unsustainable, it's unethical, and there's so much that we can do with it. And one of the ways that we can benefit that to help wildlife, endangered wildlife, and even wildlife locally is to vote with your dollars, right? Vote with your dollars. Do not support palm oil. I want to say that on like every episode, even like cloth diapering episodes. Like, oh, hey guys, at the end, do not support palm oil. Palm oil is, the industry is so cruel that palm oil is just devastating. Now, what's happening now is there are certification practices that say, okay, under this certification, you are showing us that you harvested palm oil sustainably. So instead of promoting a brand that uses palm oil heavily in their product and what kind of sourcing it's doing, support a product that doesn't use unethical palm oil. And unfortunately, sometimes it's more expensive, but for those of us who can afford it, definitely go to that one because you're sending out a massive, massive message. You're telling not consumers, you're telling companies that, we're not going to stand for your unethical practices. We are only going to support companies that care about our environment. So that's one way to help endangered animals. And that really does help on a global level. Like, it doesn't just help locally. It actually might benefit areas like, for example, on Long Island, like we don't have palm oil plantations, but it would definitely direct the tribes people there. It would help benefit them because if more people like me and like you were more considerate, compassionate, and promoting products that had sustainable harvesting of palm oil, then we would see a decline in these, orangutan numbers, their endangered numbers. And just a side note, like there's so many reasons why, endangered species, is devastating to us as a society and the environment. Like, for example, the Borneo orangutan. Do you know that there are plants that we would never have access to if they went extinct? In order for these plants to ever germinate, they need to pass through the gut of an orangutan, specifically the Borneo orangutan that lives in the Amazon rainforest. Now, if they just get knocked off the map like many other species do, then many plant species go with them. And again, we could talk about the fact that we have not even identified most of the plants in the Amazon rainforest. There's a lot of plants that we haven't identified, so like that's devastating. And a lot of those plants would go with them. They would literally just follow because they wouldn't be germinated and there would be no way for us to get them. So that's why it all goes full circle. Not to segue again, but it's just so important, you guys. So another way that, you could help the endangered animals is to visit a national wildlife refuge, park, or other open space. These protected lands provide habitat to many native wildlife, birds, fish, and plants. Scientists tell us the best way to protect endangered species is to protect the places where they live. Get involved by volunteering at your local nature center or wildlife refuge. Go wildlife or bird watching in nearby parks. Wildlife-related recreation creates millions of jobs and supports local businesses. So to find, a refuge by you, we definitely have them by us here on the east end of Long Island. Just visit, fws.gov/refuge to find a park near you. So another way to help the wildlife in the area to help bring up their numbers is to make your home wildlife friendly. Now, before I get into those notes, I actually had made bat houses in my backyard. Now, this will be the first year that we're actually going to see bats because it took 2 years for us to see any in our area. But it has been such a cool project. If you have any children, or even if you're just a nature enthusiast like myself, definitely set up a bat house. They help with mosquito control. Like, this is nature, right? Like, you bring in animals to help, maybe like an overpopulated area like us with mosquitoes. Long Island gets slammed with mosquitoes every year, all the time. It's awful. But bats come in and they greatly reduce, at least in your little humble area, the amount of mosquitoes. So that's one way that you help the bat population. And bats are actually really cute, guys. So just to say that as a side note. But again, make your home wildlife friendly. Secure garbage in shelters or cans with locking lids. Feed pets indoors and lock pets pet doors at night to avoid attracting wild animals into your home, reduce your use of water in your home and garden so that animals that live in or near water can have a better chance of survival. Disinfect bird baths, often to avoid disease transmission. A lot of people, that is so, they don't know that, and that is so important. Like, don't leave old, stale water that can get moldy, that can have other insects that may have diseases. Just don't let it sit there. Knock them out and clean it out, and then add fresh water so it can feed your birds. You can also place decals on your windows to deter bird collisions. Very sad, but a lot of birds will fly into windows and they can become stunned. They can break their necks. And millions of birds do die every year from it, so it's important to do as well. And that's just a way to help, even just just being compassionate, right? Just throw some decals up, even kid picture, anything like that. Native plants provide food and shelter for native wildlife. So attracting native insects like bees and butterflies can help pollinate your plants. The spread of non-native species has greatly impacted native populations around the world. Invasive species compete with natural species for resources and habitat. This was actually a very good point, and this is one of the reasons for the increase of endangered species, and we will certainly address it on another episode. So, again, attracting native insects to your area. For example, I'm a big gardener, so I grow area-specific flowers to attract insects that would be here locally. Herbicides and pesticides may keep yards looking nice, but they are in fact hazardous pollutants that affect wildlife on many levels. So that's obvious. That's also affecting our bee population. That's what some skeptics believe, that it is the use of Monsanto type of products that are killing our bee population. So it's super important, to be as organic as possible. Predators such as hawks, owls, and coyotes can be harmed if they eat poisoned animals who get poisoned if they're in your garden. Some groups of animals, such as amphibians, are particularly vulnerable to these chemical pollutants and suffer greatly as a result of the high levels of herbicides and pesticides in their habitat. Another way is to slow down when driving. Many animals live in developed areas, and this means that they must navigate a landscape full of human hazards. One of the biggest obstacles to wildlife living in developed areas is roads. Roads divide habitat and present a constant hazard to any animal attempting to cross from one side to the other. So please, 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 please look at both sides of the roads. Don't be on your phone. Be conscious, especially if you're living on the island. And I speak a lot from the island because that's where I live. I know in the city you take mass transit, but for those of us who drive often, please keep an eye out. I cannot tell you how many turkeys I've seen in the spring. It's so sad. On the side of the road, they're just trying to cross. You have red box turtles that get hit by cars all the time. It's just super important to be compassionate and to be mindful of, the critters around your habitat. And that's something that really does help. It does help to bring the numbers back up. And the last tip for helping wildlife, helping endangered species. This is certainly not the only, the last tip. There's many other things that you can do, but just to kind of finalize the episode because it's getting long. And that is, like we talked about, recycle and buy sustainable products. So buy recycled paper, sustainable products like bamboo, and Forest Stewardship Council wood products to protect forest species. Please never buy furniture made from wood from rainforests. No matter how bougie it looks, no matter how fancy it is, no matter how expensive it is, just don't do it. Just don't do it, because it's just, get some reclaimed wood. I'm sure it can look 10 times. I'm a welder on the side. I can make things look so much cooler than get it from the rainforest. Okay, it has that label for it, but what kind of species suffered because of that? And that's what we have to think. We have to be very, very considerate and compassionate, especially since we are in such dire straits with our forests being, eliminated for the most part. Also, recycle your cell phones. A lot of people don't realize, minerals used in cell phones and other electronics is mined in gorilla habitats. So a lot of these gorillas are killed, especially since they're very intimidating. These people come, they kill them, they mine the whole area, they excavate the whole area, similar to almost like diamond mining. A lot of people don't realize that. So please recycle your phones. Do not throw your phone out. They have bins at stores. I've seen it a million times, these blue bins, especially here in New York. Just throw your cell phone in there. Take everything off, and throw your cell phone in there. And that's huge. That's huge. That's more important than a plastic bottle. And we all know how important that is. So definitely recycle it. There's a lot of like what is that? Just natural resources inside cell phones. So it's really important that you recycle that. And again, guys, like these are just some tips that you can use to help, the wildlife in your area. I'm sure many of us who are very, alarmed by these stats would love to do more. But again, like small actions done by many can make a giant impact, like a real giant impact. That's why we always say, share this episode, because it really does help. Everything helps, just being more compassionate, being more considerate, understanding the real threat that we're facing, animals that are facing. We're not out of the woods. All of us are facing it. All of us. We have pollution, we have deforestation, we have loss of habitat, we have, you just see like cancer and disease everywhere. So we must seriously reevaluate our practices and live more in harmony with one another. And with that note, that wraps up today's episode. Thank you all so much for listening to another episode of the Nature's Premier podcast. I know today's episode was a little long, but it's just one of those discussions and topics that I have to talk about. Yes, I founded a diaper service and I work with many families and I absolutely love what we do. But one of the things that drives my passion in helping families choose a sustainable diapering solution and healthier solution for their babies is the fact that it affects the environment. Like, I am such a passionate environmentalist. I am so passionate for the future of our children that I invest time every single week in having, discussions about our environment, discussions about parenting, discussions about topics that other people don't want to talk about, like postpartum, talk about, all sorts of different things, deforestation. Like, these aren't issues that should just be addressed in their category. So, for example, this isn't like technically a, environmental podcast, but it's kind of blended in, parenting. As a parent, I'm concerned about the environment. As a parent, I'm concerned about the footprint that my children are leaving. As a parent, I'm concerned about the choices that I make that affect other children, that affect our future. So it really does blend together, and we are truly one of the only podcasts that blend all these topics together. So if you guys like what you're hearing today, please do feel free to shoot us an email if you have any comments, any criticisms, or would like to collab on a future episode of the podcast. This stuff is true to my heart. As you can tell, it's over a 30-minute episode, and there's just still 3 more hours of things I could say about it. But this was a good start for today, a good conversation opener. And if you would like to add to the conversation, please do feel free to email us at podcast@naturespremier.com. We absolutely love hearing from our listeners, and we appreciate every single one of you greatly. So thank you all so much again for tuning in to another episode. And until next week, we hope you have a wonderful, stress-free week ahead. Take care, friends.